Good morning. I bought the cheapest BLTouch I can find. Let's see how well it does and try to install it on the Neptune 2S. Special thanks to Dino Bernino for the video suggestion. I'll try to do a parts fan soon. This clone cost 1,200 yen, so just under $9 US. What I got is not at all the same as the photo on Amazon. Wire colors are different, main unit plastic, pin style, maybe the pin material. Even the PCB label is different, but the pinout is the same. For $9, I'm not going to complain. It has no bracket, so we have to make or find one and print it out. It's not really strange. Every printer is different, so it makes sense not to include a bracket. If we search and go to the Elegoo website, we can find the file with a bracket and manual. I recommend using this bracket first. Later when we look at the firmware, I'll explain why.
When I was a little girl, I believed in fairy tales. I wished my toys would come to life and that my stories could be real. Then through all the noise and confusion, I believed it was all an illusion. The world had faded black and white, nothing seemed to be right. But now I know that how it goes is that my dreams never die. As long as I keep the magic inside me alive. Do you believe in magic? Do you believe in magic? As simple as a wave, special moments made when you believe in magic.
You're going to have to get your own screws. I have only 10mm screws right now, and these are too long. I think about 6mm would be great. Okay, that fits nicely. Then if we take a look at this unit here, put it like this. These screws that came with it are also ridiculously long. I've seen some versions that use a spring for safety, but this has no spring together with it. So I'm going to use the same 10mm screws. Later I'm going to clean this up and make it look a lot better. This pin moves with almost zero friction. So if we take a look here at the label and this cable here, then we'll see that white is going to be Z minimum, and black will be ground, yellow will be signal, and red will be voltage, and brown is going to be ground again. So if we know this, then we can take a look at the main board diagram. If we take a look at the manual that we downloaded, already we can see that the color coding doesn't match the wires that came with my unit. But this should be okay because everything is labeled at least. Hopefully the color coding has some meaning, but often the color coding is ignored or not used properly between different manufacturers. important to have labels or have a diagram that we can check so that we don't make any mistakes. And then we will just ignore the color coding on this cable and go by the diagram and the silk on the actual unit. I'm going to connect the extension cables now. My extension cables are about 1 meter, and 1 meter seems like just enough. I'll just run it very basically now, and later on after connecting everything I'll clean it up. And there's a ribbon cable covering the main board. We can take out the LCD screen. Mine I've already modified, so I'll just disconnect my ribbon cable. And the first thing we're going to want to do is remove the Z minimum end stop, which is this one right here. So to do this, we might have to remove a little bit of glue. When removing the glue, if you just pick at it instead of trying to cut it, it can peel off. Peeling it off is a little bit easier. So the BLTouch is going to replace the end stop, and that's why we're removing it. If we look here at this little diagram, we can see there's SGV. So signal, ground, voltage. And when we look here, we have Z minimum and ground, and that's our 2-wire cable. So Z minimum is the signal and ground is ground. So for this one, we want the top wire to be in the bottom position and the second wire to be in the center. So for mine, that's going to be like this. I noticed that it's a little bit loose. I don't really like the feeling of the connection so much. So afterwards, I think it's a good idea to just remelt this glue to help hold it down, because look at this, it's moving around a lot and we don't want it to come off. My white cable is Z minimum, and I set the white cable to signal, and black cable is ground, and I've set it to center, which is ground. Now we're going to look over here where it says BLTouch, and also under here we can see the same SVG. So we will set this again. On mine, signal is yellow, voltage is red, and ground is brown. So signal should be at the top. So signal is with signal, voltage is in the center, and ground is on the ground pin. And this is the best way to wire your BLTouch. Go by the diagrams and not by the colors, or you might make a mistake. Let's clean everything up here and close it, and we'll get started with the firmware. We can download the firmware file from the Elegoo website. There's a firmware update notes file. It'll help you choose which firmware to download. There's also a password for the zip file. So we download the correct version, then open the file and select the folder for our printer. Inside the firmware folder, we have the firmware bin file and settings text file. Inside the elegoo.txt file, we're going to need to make some changes. The first change is config leveling mode. Under bed leveling, we should change 0 to 1. We can see here 1 is for auto leveling. Next we need to change bed leveling method. Under auto leveling, we can see bed leveling method. We should change 0 to 3. 3 will turn on the BLTouch. Then we need to check Z safe homing and change 0 to 1. This will turn it on. Then we need to check Z minimum probe mode. Change 0 to 1. And this will set for Z minimum, and that's where we plug the BLTouch pin. So let's take this file and the firmware file and put it to SD card. Make sure you save the file. Now when we put this card in the printer and turn it on, the printer will update the firmware with our new settings. And we can see that the probe moved up and down several times, initializing itself. And we could also see that on the screen, the firmware updated. So now if we go into Tools, we can see that the menu has changed, and now we have auto leveling option. If we click on auto leveling, then we can begin the first auto level.
wished my toys would come to life and that my stories could be real. Then through all the noise and confusion, I believed it was all an illusion. The world had faded black and white, nothing seemed to be right. But now I know that how it goes is that my dreams never die. As long as I keep the magic inside me alive. Do you believe in magic? Do you believe in magic? As simple as a wave, special moments made when you believe in magic.
After finishing the probing, we can see that it stopped at the center, and we have the offset menu now open. So we need to take a feeler gauge or paper, and we need to check the offsets. So now my offset is far too high, so I want to go down. Now I can just start feeling it. Let's go down a little bit slower. Alright, this feels good to me. You might have to play and change the offset a little bit to get the best offset for your prints. So now if we go back, if we want to change the offset in the future, then we can go into Tool and to More. Then here we have the Z offset option. And we can see how our Z offset is set. I'm going to try turning off the printer now. I saw some people say that when you turn off the printer and turn it on again, the Z offset is lost. So we can see that the Z offset stays in memory with the current firmware version. So if you're having trouble, you can try updating your firmware. Now I'm going to try to do probing one more time and see if I have to reset the offset or if it remembers my previous offset. Okay, and we can see here that the offset has returned to 0. So we would have to put the offset in again. Okay, so we're in the middle of a lightning storm right now, but I want to finish recording. I might have to edit a little bit more than usual. I didn't do it this time, but before we do the auto leveling, one thing that we should do is preheat the bed and the nozzle. When the temperature rises, the metals in the printer expand a little bit, so we'll get slightly different results. On the Elegoo website, it says that they don't recommend installing a BLTouch, and the reason they don't recommend installing the BLTouch is they say that the bed is small, so we can't get so much benefit from using the grid system. Now, this is partially true, but one important thing to keep in mind is that this bed often, or maybe even usually, has a terrible warp. If you take the ruler, then put it down on the bed and shine a light behind it, you should be able to see that the bed is not straight. There should be lights coming through from behind. So the BLTouch will be able to help us with that warp. It's also good to do a basic leveling and not rely only on the BLTouch. Now, after we install the BLTouch, there's no more leveling option. So if we want to do leveling, we need to either turn the motor off inside the homing menu, or with the power off, we can move around by hand. If we make a good basic leveling, then the BLTouch is going to have to do less compensation during the print, so there will be less Z-axis movement and the printer is not going to have to work as hard. If we connect the printer to Pronterface, we can see exactly what the BLTouch is doing. I'll put a link in the description to my video that shows how to install Pronterface and connect the printer. Once we're in Pronterface, we need to make sure that we home the printer first. After homing the printer, we can enter the G29 command. After the probing's finished, we can see the results. If we copy these lines, we can go online and use a visualizer to more clearly see the data. I'll leave a link in the description. There's a few other points that might be interesting for you to check. Here we have an offset. So X probe offset from extruder and Y probe offset from extruder. This is why I said it's a good idea to use the bracket that was made by Elegoo for the first time. What this does is it lets the printer know the distance between the nozzle and the pin of the BLTouch. So if we change the brackets, we'll have to change this value. And if you want the highest accuracy, you should double check to make sure that these values are correct. Later we might change Z offset, but at the moment we'll leave it at 0. Here's the XY speed during probing, so how fast the head and the table will move. Then we can see that there's two speeds for the Z, fast speed and a slow speed. So when the probe goes down to the table, it'll move at the fast speed the first time, and then it'll make a second movement towards the table at a slower speed to get a higher accuracy. If we go up a little bit, we can see the grid max X and max Y points. This defines how many points the probe is going to touch. So now we have 4 by 4, so it'll make a grid of 16 points. Here, these two values for Z clearance, this is to make sure that the probe is not hitting the table. So how much clearance do you have when the probe is being deployed? And how much clearance do you have when moving from point to point? It's possible to lower this to increase the speed, but when we do the first time, let's keep it at this value so we can make sure we don't have any crashes. Excel is also a good way to visualize data. I collected a large amount. The first set was from 11 different G29 commands. For each of the 16 probe points, I collected the highest and lowest readings. The highest accuracy point was plus minus 8 micron, and the lowest accuracy point was plus minus 29 micron. Overall, the average accuracy was plus minus 17 micron. We had a 21 micron spread between the highest and lowest accuracy. This is not bad, but the 21 point spread was a little bit interesting. If we compare the first test to the last test, we can see the bed is slowly rising. I think it's because the first test started just as the bed reached 60 degrees. But the test took place over 1 hour of time, so the bed gradually shifted as the heat spread. The next day I tested it again just as the bed reached 60 degrees, and I found the result was similar to the first test from the previous day. It's interesting to see the visualization of the heat spread effects. I tried testing again, this time with 10 tests in a span of only 10 minutes. The shorter span of time gave a much better result, ranging from plus minus 5 micron to plus minus 20 micron, for an average of 11 and a spread of just 15 micron. To get a better idea of the mechanical accuracy of the BLTouch clone, I did another set of tests, this time without using heat. This turned out really nice. We got a high accuracy point of 6 micron and the lowest accuracy was 14 micron. It gives us an average of 10 micron and spread of only 7 micron. This high number is the important one. It shows the worst case accuracy. The average accuracy can be compared to the specification standard deviation. It's over double the 5 micron spec, but I just ignore the specs. An average plus minus 10 micron and at worst case 14 micron is really good. I put a card on the bed during leveling to prove the BLTouch was working. We can see during printing that the Z-axis is moving to try to compensate. I just downloaded a bed leveling test from Printables and changed the scale to fit my bed. The center line didn't print so well on the first try. I increased the grid points to 7 and also expanded the area by 10 millimeters. I think we can expand between 15 to 20 millimeters before hitting an end stop. I didn't notice any problems during printing after expanding the area and increasing the points. No modification to your G-code is necessary to get the prints working properly. Just run the auto leveling, adjust your offset, and start your print. This is the last test, so I want to give my final thoughts. Yes, other printers with different firmwares implement the BLTouch better, but if this is your first printer, then you might not notice and you might be very happy with the results. I tried to collect as much information as possible and show my first experience so you can decide for yourself if you want to install the BLTouch or not. For me, the BLTouch is nice. Honestly, I only level my bed once or twice per month, and often I'm not using paper, I'm just going by eye. With the BLTouch, I will probably level once before starting prints on a specific day, but I won't level every print. On the Elegoo homepage, it says the Z stepper motor might make a clicking noise and recommended installing a smoother. With my initial test, I heard the motor, but it was just a standard movement sound. On the final test with proper leveling, I heard nothing. Let me know in the comments if you have a different experience. At the moment, I think if you do a good basic level, you'll have no issues. I'm going to keep my BLTouch installed. I like it. This time the result was nice. There was still a slight imperfection in the center, but I think playing with the offset and also the slicer overlap settings would probably get near perfect results. I'll try to leave any relevant links in the description. Please like and subscribe if you found this video helpful, and thank you always for watching. See you next time.